Guess who's back? It's been a real hot minute though. New hair, but still massive forehead. Anyway, sorry for going AWOL for a few months, but that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about the Paranormal Activity series. Let me just get something straight. I love the movies and I will not tolerate any slander here, okay? However, I do have some thoughts, and that's what we're here to do today. Now, there's this YouTuber I watch who reviews horror movies. She's called Possessed by Horror, and she has a personal account called Sarah Hawkinson. Love her to pieces. If you love horror movies and you love Harry Potter, she's a gal. She's recently been ranking some of her favourite movie series and TV series. She recently ranked what's it called? American Horror Story. She ranked all seasons of American Horror Story. This is just my opinion, alright? Also, if you can hear noise, it's my laptop fan. Please don't judge me. But yeah, I've been inspired by her to rank one of my first ever favourite movie series ever, the Paranormal Activity series. So anyway, let's commence with the video because I've already been talking far too long and my mouth is already dry. So just before we get into the list, again, I know I'm rambling still. I just want to say that the thing is with these movies, with this series, is that a lot of the series is only good, well, can I even speak? A lot of these movies can only be considered good movies if you've seen the whole franchise. Otherwise, it won't make sense. If you've seen these movies, you'll know exactly what I mean. Marvel is mad at how connected this universe is, you know what I mean? And one of my earliest hyperfixations was this series. I know that's weird to say, but like, I started watching these movies when I was like 12. And I would sit there on my little BlackBerry researching theories, researching all the Easter eggs, researching like Paranormal Activity, ending explained. Like, I was one of those people. I still am. I cannot watch, read, or consume any piece of media without it taking over my entire life for at least 3 weeks at a time. It's an issue. And these movies, because I did all that research when I was like 12, make a lot of sense to me, and it makes me enjoy the movies more because I feel more immersed. It makes me feel involved, if that makes sense. So yeah. I'm also going to warn you before we get into this. My taste in movies is, how shall we say, questionable. Even at the best of times. I've got a video coming on that soon, so, well, hopefully. There seems to be this pattern where critics will say they hate a movie, but I absolutely adore it, and then vice versa. But yeah, when I recommend things to people, I always give them like a pre-warning where I'm like, I love terrible movies. Also, I really love the found footage genre, especially in horror for some reason. It feels personal. I feel involved. There's that word again. And also because we're in the era of vloggers, it just feels right, you know? You're telling me that you hear a noise downstairs and you're not going to whip out your camera to film it? Sure. Okay, so let's get into it. Basically, I'll be going from worst to best, if that makes sense. I'll be starting with the worst, I'll be finishing with the best. Okay. My brain is a fishbowl and it's empty, basically. Starting off with the worst, in my opinion, but I think everyone agrees on this. The worst Paranormal Activity movie is Ghost Dimension. This was the last installment in the franchise, or the last so far. Rotten Tomatoes gave it... Rotten Tomatoes, am I American? Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 14%. IMDb, it has a 4.6 out of 10. And it deserves it. Basically, a rundown of the plot is a family finds an old and mysterious camcorder that can record strange apparitions. Their daughter develops a strange imaginary friend. Typical ghost movie stuff. I'm all about it. Here is where my issues lie with this movie. Everything that made the Paranormal Activity movies good, per se, it feels like they threw straight out the window with this movie. My main problem with this movie was, well, apart from the fact that the plot was threadbare and just completely awful, the inclusion of the camera that could show the actual ghosts and demons in the house, I really didn't like it. Showing us the Toby, which is like the main villain demon in the whole series, really ruined this movie, and it almost ruined the franchise for me. It made it made Toby less mysterious. I just have a problem when movies show us something that's supposed to be scary so often that it makes it less scary. And in this movie, showing us Toby made him entirely less scary. When you don't see the demon or the ghost, you have your own idea of it. So having it be shown to us and have it be such a letdown of what it looks like ruins your idea of it, and it ruins your idea of the series, because now you know exactly what it looks like throughout the whole series, and it's awful. This movie was so obviously a cash grab, and that's upsetting, because I don't know, it's a good series up until this one. They were trying to... It was released so many years after the original series as like a cash grab. They're like, can we milk this cash cow more? It's like, no. The cash cow's dried up and the others have gone, ugh. There's no more money in this series. And you've put the nail in the coffin now, basically. Up next is Paranormal Activity 4. The synopsis of Paranormal Activity 4 is that 5 years after the events of the first movie, a family starts to fall victim to strange occurrences when a new neighbour moves in across from them. It has a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 4.6 out of 10 on IMDb. Maybe a bit harsh on Rotten Tomatoes, but I never really agree with Rotten Tomatoes anyway. I don't think this would be controversial to put in this place at all. It's not the best. In my opinion, it's not actually that scary. It's got some cool horror moments, and I'll give it that, but it's not scary. I watched this one and went straight to bed without being scared. I walked through a dark hallway into my bedroom, got into bed and fell asleep straight away. That's not supposed to happen. It's unfair because there's nothing wrong with this movie, but there's nothing outstanding about it. It had literally everything else the other movies had. It was just a bit boring. The plot was barely there. It only provided that tiny bit of information that we needed or wanted from the first and second movies. And that was it. That was all it was there for. One thing I did like about this movie was the inclusion of the modern technology. So instead of just using a camera, we saw phone camera being used, we saw a webcam being used, and we saw the use of that Kinect sensor. I really liked the use of the Kinect sensor in this movie. I think it provided a really cool scene. It provided a really cool horror moment. Apart from that, there's nothing really that different or interesting about this movie, and it didn't really scare me that much, and that says a lot for me. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Okay, above that is Paranormal Activity 2. This has an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 5.6 out of 10 on IMDb. I'm kind of shocked at how different those ratings are, but you know, we move. This movie is about a family who moves into a new home, and they install security cameras after they are broken into, but what they find is the house is actually haunted. You know, just typical ghost horror movie stuff. Yes, the family's white, before you ask. I'm just gonna say I'm a bit biased with this one because this is actually the first Paranormal Activity movie I ever watched. I was literally 12, watched it with one of my older sisters and my mum, I think it was. I seem to have this problem where I watch the sequels before I watch the first movie. And I end up liking the sequel a bit more sometimes, but that's not always the case, looking at you grown-ups. The nostalgia factor comes in for me here because this was the first one I ever watched, but it's still not the best one. There are some really boring bits in the movie, I'm not gonna lie. There's some bits where you just sit there, you're like, what was the point? Why am I sitting here for an hour and a half watching this? The security camera gimmick was good for like the scenes where she's being dragged down the stairs and stuff like that, but it's wore off so quick when half an hour of the movie is literally just flicking through the different rooms in the house with nothing going on. I do not want to see that goddamn pool cleaner spin around in the pool again. My favourite scene of this whole movie is the kitchen scene where she's sat in there and suddenly every door and drawer just flies open. The next one is Paranormal Activity 3. This one is a prequel about Katie and Christy and the origins of the paranormal haunting that follows them into adulthood. So this was a prequel to the movies 1 and 2. It got a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb. I think it was a really good prequel, to be quite honest. It had some really good scares. I think it perfectly filled in some of the plot points. This one had the rotating camera in the hallway that flicked from the living room to the kitchen. I really liked that. I think it had a good scare moment with the sheet and the babysitter, if you know what scene I'm talking about. Once again, I was an early teen when these are my favourite movies, so my expectations were on the floor. This movie has probably my favourite scene of the whole franchise. It's when the mum is on the phone to the grandma and the grandma's trying to convince her to come to the house, and she's like, no, it's not that serious, we'll be fine. She leaves the kitchen, she comes back into the kitchen and all the furniture's gone and it suddenly drops from the ceiling. Best scene of the whole franchise. The only reason I rank this movie to be like this low, I think it's third. I only ranked it to be like third best is because the trailer let this movie down so hard. There was scenes in the trailer that were cut out from the final cut of the movie, so some of the best horror bits were not even in the final cut. Like there's a scene in the trailer where they're playing knock knock on the mirror and she turns around and the reflection stays the same, I think it is. And that's not included in the movie. Hello, if I see a trailer, I want that to be in the movie. On to second best, and this might be a strange pick for second best. I almost put it first, but I don't know, something in me decided not to. But second best for me is the first Paranormal Activity. I know I'm gonna get crucified. Please don't. This movie, typical horror ghost story setup again. After moving into their new home, a couple become increasingly disturbed by a strange activity in their home. They begin to film their life in the hopes to capture the evidence on film. In my notes, and there's a lot of them, I said that I only placed this higher than Paranormal Activity 3 because I think this is the only one that could stand on its own as a like standalone movie. And I still stand by that. You could just watch this single movie and it'd be fine on its own. You don't need anything else to understand it. You don't need to watch any other movies. You could watch the second one to provide some context for the first one, but you don't need the second one to watch this and for this to still be good because it still makes sense. There's still good scares. The characters are all there and they make sense. You know who everyone is. So you could literally just, if you don't fancy watching the whole series, just watch this one. This movie was revolutionary, especially in the horror genre, because it revitalized the found footage genre. It was something that audiences, especially young audiences, hadn't seen before. It was refreshing, it felt different, and because it was a found footage, it feels so personal, and that's why it's extra scary. It was so good that it had a limited release and they made people demand it to be played in cinemas in their town. That's how good this movie was. And that's how new and fresh this was for the horror genre. It basically had Twilight Syndrome. It was only supposed to be like a small indie movie and it got catapulted into the limelight and everyone loved it. And then they milked it for several more movies. The scares, they're good. Sure, there's not as scary now because, you know, the horror genre's progressed since then. We've got more scary. But it's still a good scare movie. It's good sleepover fodder as well, because after watching this movie, you don't want to do anything alone or in the dark. I was debating putting clips from the trailer in this video, and I don't think I will because I will not sleep. Also, this ending is iconic. Her jumping at the camera. Love that. And finally, onto what I consider the best movie out of the Paranormal Activity series, and it's actually the spin-off to the series, Paranormal Activity: The Marked Ones. Basically, this movie is about two teenagers who begin to have strange experience after a neighbour in their apartment complex mysteriously dies. It was rated 39% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 5 out of 10 on IMDb. I think this one is very much a fan favourite. It's going to become like a cult classic, I hope, because it's just good. Basically, this one ties in so many of the films from the series. And there's so many like little crossovers and links and Easter eggs, and it's like Marvel thought Infinity War was the most ambitious crossover in cinema history, you know what I mean? It manages to provide a fresh take on the paranormal genre and the Paranormal Activity series in general by having people of colour as the main characters and having it in a different setting other than just like a middle class suburb, it provides a fresh take on it. It gives us different characters, and it manages to subvert certain stereotypes and tropes and archetypes in these movies, and it's really fun. Sorry, battery died, but I'm just going to have to wrap this up really quick. I'm just basically going to finish off that the character work in this is really good, the plot's really good, the ending's really good, especially if you've seen the other movies. And I will give the disclaimer that this movie is only my favourite because I've seen the rest and I can appreciate all the little links and ties. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. Go binge all the movies if you want to, but yeah, that's my ranking of all the Paranormal Activity movies, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you again soon and not in 5 months.